One of the many questions that I and many others have surrounding Daggerheart is about its longevity. Will it be able to continue to ride its initial success out and continue to flourish as a successful game over the coming months and years? I sincerely hope that it does. I think the game is a lot of fun and offers plenty to deep dive on. Now, one of the best ways to help ensure that your game is not simply forgotten is to provide continued support, and that's exactly what we're already seeing with it, and they've wasted no time either. On the same day that the game officially launched, new playtest material was released on the Daggerheart website for 2 new classes. This has now since been expanded to 4 new classes, 1 new domain, 6 new ancestries, and 6 new communities. That's a lot. This is exactly the kind of thing that I hope to see from a development team that is looking to expand and grow and continue to support their game. Giving players new and more options to explore with and play is a big part of helping the game to succeed, so I am extremely happy to see this kind of commitment already being made from Darrington Press. The question then becomes, are any of these things actually good? So let's find out. Today we're going to be discussing each of the new classes, the Assassin, Brawler, Warlock, and the Witch, as well as the new domain, the Dread domain, which right now is applicable to both the Warlock and the Witch. Since this is playtest content and isn't official yet, I'm also going to be providing some of my thoughts where I think some improvements could be made. So let's get into it. We're going to start alphabetically with the Assassin. But before that, some incredibly exciting news. I've been asked to contribute to a new Kickstarter project for Daggerheart Incredible Creatures, Adversaries for Daggerheart. This is such a cool opportunity and kind of a dream of mine that I'm beyond thrilled to be a part of. One of the biggest places that the game is lacking right now is in the adversary department, and Incredible Creatures is seeking to fix that with new adversaries and environments and layers and even maps, all inspired by brilliant pieces of art. And best of all, I am going to be writing a few of the monsters for the book. So the Kickstarter is live now, check the link in the description or the pinned comments to go and support it and me, and let's help build this game together. Thank you so much, I could not be more excited about this. The first thing that stands out to me about the Assassin is that it's not a rogue subclass. I think a lot of people would often associate these two things together. I mean, even one of the most iconic rogue subclasses in D&D is the Assassin. Also, I did just kind of think that the Nightwalker rogue almost fulfills that same niche, just in a bit more of a quote-unquote magical way. So it does feel like there may be a bit of overlap there, but at least they do take something of a different approach. First, our domains are Blade and Midnight. It's worth noting that this does share one domain, Midnight, with the Rogue. This gives us access to some more powerful and flavorful cards for the Assassin. I went over each of the first level domain cards in detail in my full class overview video, so I'm not going to be doing that again here. I will say though that the Blade domain card, Not Good Enough, feels very on brand for Assassin. Getting to reroll some damage just in case we didn't roll quite high enough feels very nice for the Assassin. On the Midnight domain side, Pick and Pull feels very appropriate, but also Uncanny Disguise feels incredibly thematic. Looking back at the main class, we have an evasion score of 12, which also matches the Rogue, and is tied for the highest in the game, but we only have 5 hit points, which is tied for the lowest in the game. This is reflective of the fact that the Assassin is incredibly challenging to hit and is an expert at avoiding just about anything, but if they do get hit, it's probably not going to go all that well for them. Our hope feature, Grim Resolve, allows us to spend 3 hope to clear 2 stress. This is something that will be particularly helpful, as we will see. Assassins are very heavy users of stress. Whether it's through the domain cards from Blade and Midnight, which both have a reasonable amount of cards that utilize the resource, or through their class feature, which we should probably discuss right about now. Assassins actually have 2 class features. First up is Ambush. This lets us, when we move into melee range of a target and make a successful attack against them, to force the target to make a reaction roll with a difficulty of 10 plus our level. If they fail, the damage of the attack increases by an amount of d6s equal to our current tier. I like the design of this ability because you're not forced to spend the stress immediately. You get to know if the attack lands or not first at least. Only then do you have to spend the stress. And yes, they could still succeed on their reaction roll, but I like that you don't at least need to immediately burn the resource on an attack that just completely whiffs. This is a very cool feature, but it will also likely be a pretty consistent tax on our available stress. So it's nice that our hope ability allows us to recover some of it fairly easily. On top of that, Assassins have our other class feature, Get In and Get Out. This lets us spend a hope and then we get to ask our GM for either a quick or inconspicuous way in or out of a building or structure that we can see. Then the next roll that we make to capitalize on this information has advantage. This one I'm not as big of a fan of. It's interesting and extremely flavorful, but could be challenging in play. Now, the very nature of this game is one that is constantly changing or fluctuating based on player actions, so this isn't dramatically different from that, but I could still see it posing some issues. It's also just providing advantage on the roll to capitalize on that information, which is a bit ambiguous, but it allows the player maybe some more creativity. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being refined or a little bit tightened up before the actual release. Moving on to our subclasses, like everyone else, the Assassin has two, the Executioner's Guild and the Poisoner's Guild. We'll begin with the Executioner's Guild, and again, like in the last video, we are only going to look at the Foundation feature. This subclass sets our spellcast trait to Finesse. I'll be honest, I feel a bit conflicted about Assassins even having access to spellcasting at all, but I suppose that's part of the design quote-unquote issues that arise with the domain system. They chose to give the class access to the Midnight Domain, which has spellcasting, so as a result, they necessarily need to provide a spellcasting trait, otherwise they'd just be locked out of a whole bunch of cards. Anyway, that aside, let's look at our first Foundation feature, First Strike. This makes it so that the first successful attack we make during a scene deals double damage. I also love the design of this since it doesn't require you to go first or before an enemy, or even if it's just your first attack. It just needs to be your first successful attack. This almost guarantees value out of the feature, which feels great, unless you're obviously just completely missing every single attack. Just a reminder though that double damage is not double hit points. When it works, this greatly increases the odds that your first successful hit will be a severe hit. Secondly, we get Backstab, which turns the d6s from our Ambush class feature into d8s, which in turn increases the likely damage output and combos quite nicely with First Strike. Our second subclass is the Poisoner's Guild. This sets our spellcast trait to Presence. This is interesting if for no other reason than for the fact that it is the first class that has its subclasses set its spellcasting trait to something different. So that's kind of cool. Our Foundation feature is Toxic Concoctions. This feature gives us 3 poisons that we know. Gorgon's Rod, which gives a target a permanent -1 to their difficulty, but it does not stack. Grave Spore causes the target to mark a stress, and Leech Weed increases the damage of the attack by 1d6. We can mark a stress to add 1d4 plus 1 tokens to the card, which represents the amount of times that we can apply the poison, and once per successful attack, we can spend a token to apply that poison. Again, I like that these only work with a successful attack, so you're not wasting the poison on a totally missed one. Overall, I think the Assassin is a very cool class. I'm not entirely sure that it needed to exist in this current state, and perhaps it could have done with its own unique domain rather than borrowing Midnight, but then there may have been way too much overlap anyway. I think it's a very cool option, and I'm curious to see how it plays out once it's published, but it's certainly extremely powerful. The next class is the Brawler. When this was first released, it was called the Fighter, which I think led to a little bit of confusion about what the class was, especially given that the Warrior already exists in the game, and I think many were equating the Fighter with the Fighter from D&D. In any case, they changed the name to the Brawler to better represent what the class is, which is one that fights primarily with hand-to-hand combat, much more akin to the Monk from D&D. The Brawler is tied to the Valor and Bone domains, which also feels like very good fits. Bone is all about understanding the body and the physicality, and Valor is about putting the hurt on while also keeping some defenses alive. Again, these domains have been fully explored in the main class overview video, so I'm not going to do it again here. Just as a quick highlight, Bare Bones feels particularly well suited to a Brawler, and honestly basically anyone that has access to the Valor domain. It's just so good. Forceful Push is also a very strong option for a Brawler. Looking back at the main class itself, we can see that our starting evasion is 10, and we start with 6 hit points. Our Hope feature, Staggering Strike, allows us to spend 3 points when we hit an adversary to also deal them 1 stress to make them staggered, which means that all attack rolls that they make are at disadvantage. But that's not where things go wild. Let's take a look at our class feature, I Am the Weapon. Firstly, provided we are not using any weapons, we gain a +1 to our evasion, and our unarmed strikes are now considered melee weapons, and we get to choose whichever trait we want when attacking with them. Additionally, our damage with this becomes a d10 plus a d6, which both scale with proficiency. This is incredible at both providing consistent damage, but also high damage output. Based on this graph from D&D Unoptimized, even just with this before anything else, we have a 45% chance at hitting major and a 31% chance at hitting severe damage, which is insane for level 1, and we haven't even added any of our other class features or abilities. Our second class feature is Combo Strikes. This lets us, after we roll damage, mark a stress to begin a combo strike. The way this works is that we then roll our Combo Strikes die, which begins as a d4. We note the value, and then we roll it again. If the second roll is greater to or equal than the previous roll, we roll again, and we keep doing this until we roll lower than our previous roll. So at a minimum, we are guaranteed 2 rolls of our d4 from the die, and this could go on for quite a while. Now, I love rolling dice as much as the next person, but this does seem like it could get a little bit cumbersome given that we already are using 2 different dice for our main attack, and now we have another different dice for our combo strikes, but I mean, it's still incredible and sounds fun as hell. Looking at our subclasses, the first one is Juggernaut. This gives us 2 features. Juggernaut allows us to turn the D10 damage from our unarmed strike die into a D12, and on top of that, we're able to mark a stress to target 2 creatures within melee range with the same attack roll. Obviously, this second part is a bit conditional on whether or not it can even work, but if it can, it's obviously great. Additionally, Juggernaut provides the Overwhelm option, which lets us, on a successful attack, spend hope to either force the target to mark a stress or to throw them to close range. There's quite a bit of overlap between this and the Forceful Push card from the Valor domain, which not only lets you push a target to close range, but also increases the damage of the attack by 1d6, and allows for a hope to be spent to make the target vulnerable. I feel like in 99% of the cases, unless you really want them to mark the stress, or if you didn't take Forceful Push, the card is just the better option. I also wonder if this is going to get a little bit of tweaking. Our second subclass is the Martial Artist. How this works is that at each tier of play, we get to select 2 stances. To go into a stance, we need to spend a focus point, which is a unique resource for this subclass. We then enter a stance which lasts until we take severe damage, the scene ends, or we mark our last hit point, or we go into a different stance. To gain focus back, you roll a number of d6s equal to your instinct during a rest, and gain focus equal to the highest number rolled. Just a few notes on this: while I like that we get to select 2 and there are quite a few to choose from, I don't like that, as written at least, you can't ever swap them. Now, I'm sure that most GMs would just allow you to, but it would be nice if we could swap them during a long rest or even at a level up. Secondly, you can potentially pile up your focus points if you aren't spending as many as you're gaining, or if you take relatively quick successive rests. Anyway, let's take a look at each of our tier 1 stances. I'm going to show all of them later, but we're just going to be focusing on tier 1, as that's what we've been doing in all of the overview videos so far. Brutal lets us roll an additional damage die when we roll maximum damage on a damage die. Interestingly, this isn't also capped, so it could apply to both your d10 and d6 from unarmed strikes, or any attack that rolls multiple dice. A lot of potential power here, but behind some very specific roles. Next is Defensive, which makes attacks against us have disadvantage unless the adversary marks a stress. This is just really good. Many adversary abilities are powered by stress, so requiring them to spend one to just not have disadvantage is very strong. Grappling allows us to spend a focus point to give the target the restraint condition, which just prevents them from moving, so this could be situationally useful. Steady gives us a -1 to evasion, but in exchange for that, allows us, when we roll damage on a successful attack, to roll an additional damage die and drop the lowest one. Precise gives us a flat +1 to our attack rolls, and Quick, finally, allows us, when we make an attack roll, to spend a focus to include an additional target that's within range. There's a good amount of variety here, and none feel egregiously bad or just offensively good either. Defensive and Precise feel very good at just allowing you to be a consistent attacker who's also able to stay in the front line. Steady also feels good and very worth the cost of a -1 to evasion, especially since, again, this would work with both the d10 and d6 from our unarmed strikes. The Brawler feels like a strong and well-rounded class that has a lot of powerful options going for it, and I like the fact that you get to make so many different decisions with it. It sounds like a lot of fun. Our next class to look at is the Warlock, and this is a fascinating one because it's also the first time that we are getting a brand new domain included with the class, which offers up a ton of new possibilities. The Warlock belongs to the Dread and Grace domains. As usual, we're going to take a look at the first level domain cards, this time for the Dread domain, and you'll quickly notice some interesting designs here. Our first Dread card is Blighting Strike. This lets us make a spellcast roll against a target within far range. On a success, they take d6 magic damage using our proficiency, and the next time they deal damage to one of our allies, the damage dealt is reduced by 1d6. Damage and a debuff tied into one ability is already quite strong, but if we roll it with Fear, the damage we deal is increased from 1d6 to 1d10. This is a common theme that you'll see with the Warlock and the Dread domain more broadly, that there is a benefit to rolling with Fear. Our second card, Voice of Dread, allows us to speak directly into the ears of a creature that we can see, so there's no specific range requirement provided that we can see them. When we do this, we can torment our target. We must succeed on a spellcast roll against them, and on a success, they mark a stress and become temporarily vulnerable. This kind of reminds me of the Grace domain card Enthralling Performance, but it does certainly have a very different use case, and I'm totally here for it. Our final first level Dread domain card is Umbral Veil. This requires a successful spellcast roll, but on a success, we can spend any number of hope to place an equivalent number of tokens on this card. Then, when an attack roll is made against us, we can spend any number of the tokens on the card to gain a +1 bonus to our evasion per token against the attack. This is reminiscent of something like Shield from D&D, but like a whole lot more reined in. I think it's really strong and has no limited amount of uses, so provided you have the hope to spend, we can just keep topping this up. I think all three of these cards have great use cases, and there's very distinct flavor and feel to the Dread Domain. I really like what they've come up so far with it. Looking back at our main class, our base evasion is 11 and we start with 5 hit points, so we are certainly not the most durable of classes. Our hope feature, Patron's Boon, allows us to spend 3 hope to call out to our patron for help and gain 1d4 favor. Favor is another unique resource, this time it's just for the Warlock, and is described in our class feature. With our class feature, we have devoted ourselves to our patron, so we record their name and, more importantly, their sphere of influence. We record those spheres of influence on our sheet and set their bonus to a +2. Each time we increase our tier of play, we gain a permanent +1 bonus to each sphere, meaning that this will max out at +5. Essentially, these function like extra experiences, except instead of requiring a hope to use, we spend a favor to activate them, and they are a little bit more reined in. We begin with 3 favor and can have a maximum of 6, and we can regain an amount equal to our presence during a rest as one of our downtime actions. Now, this does mean that we need to sacrifice something else in order to regain some of our favor, and if we choose not to do so, the GM gains a fear instead. The flavor of this is very cool and feels very real, like we are actually needing to sacrifice something to our patron to gain these abilities. How useful or not your spheres of influence are will largely depend on the campaign that you're playing in though. Also, recovering favor is a little bit tight, only regaining our presence score during a rest, and then having the hope feature that has a lot of variance. Given that low rolling and hitting a 1 after spending 3 hope is gonna feel brutal. I feel like to control for that, it should probably be at least 1d4 +1 favor. Anyway, moving to our subclasses, our first one is Pact of the Endless. This sets our spellcasting trait to presence and gives us the ability Patron's Mantle. This allows us to mark a stress to transform into a terrifying visage that lasts until we take severe damage or the scene ends. While transformed, we can spend a favor instead of an armor slot, and we have advantage on rolls to intimidate a target. Spending a favor instead of an armor slot can be incredibly powerful and is probably a big part of why regaining favor is not particularly easy. Pact of the Endless also gives us another ability, Deadly Devotion, which makes it so that after we make a successful attack, we can spend a favor to gain a bonus +1 to our evasion until the next time an attack succeeds against us or until our next rest. This is also very powerful and incidentally reduces the likelihood that we would need to spend a favor instead of an armor slot. Also, as written at least, there is no limit on this stacking, so each time you successfully attack, you can just keep adding +1 provided you have the favor to do so. I do feel like the intent is that this is only supposed to work once and it's not supposed to stack though, but if that is the case, they should refine the wording here. Our second subclass is Pact of the Wrathful. This also sets our spellcasting trait to presence and gives us the feature Patron's Wrath. This allows us to empower our primary weapon. To do so, we spend any number of favor. Then when we roll damage, we can mark a stress to deal an extra number of d6s equal to the amount of favor spent empowering the weapon. This empowering lasts until our next rest. That makes this ability obviously incredibly powerful, especially given that weapons are already scaling with proficiency. Now, it is a huge resource sink, but it's really good. I love the flavor and the concept of the Warlock. You don't get quite this level of connection with your patron with Warlocks in D&D. Here, you actually feel like you're sacrificing something, part of your rest, to gain some favor, and you get to directly use that power to gain some pretty incredible bonuses. It feels like a very strong class that also enables a lot of both tactical and narrative decision making, which I like a lot. And our final new class to look at is the Witch. This class belongs to both the Dread and the Sage domains. So we've already got 2 classes using the Dread domain, and we just covered it, so we're not going to do it again, and Sage was covered in the previous overview video. Our base evasion score is 10 and we begin with 6 hit points. Our hope feature is Witch's Charm, which allows us, whenever ourselves or an ally within far range fails a roll, to spend 3 hope to change it to a success with fear instead. This is very interesting and I love the decision making implications here, especially if you failed with hope. Deciding whether succeeding but having it be with fear is better or not than failing can make or break something and just feels very unique and flavorful. I love this feature. This brings us to our first class feature, Hex. This makes it so that whenever a creature causes us or an ally within close range to mark any number of hit points, we can mark a stress to hex them. While they're hexed, the target suffers some significant drawbacks. Firstly, they gain a penalty to their damage thresholds equal to our spellcast rate, so likely starting at -2. On top of that, they also suffer a penalty to their difficulty equal to our tier. This is quite strong and makes it so not only do they become easier to hit, but then when we do hit, we're also more likely to have them mark more hit points on those successful hits. This is a very good self-driven combo that can also scale as we grow with power. Then we also get our second class feature, Commune. During downtime, we're able to commune with some other entity. To do so, we ask a question and roll 4d6. If any of the dice match, we get to see some vision and receive answers in return. Some of these are very good and can evoke quite a narrative moment during play. Even ones that might not seem like they would, like if you roll matching ones and get a flavor relevant to the answer. If you're asking about someone that's missing, maybe you taste blood, suggesting that something not great has happened, or maybe you taste salt in the air, suggesting that the person is being kept near the ocean. There's a lot of very interesting options available here, and a lot of fun can be had with it. Most notably though, unlike with the Warlock, this does not consume one of our downtime actions to use it. Looking at our subclasses, the first option we get is Hedge. This sets our spellcast trait to Instinct, and it also gives us the ability Herbal Remedies, which makes it so that whenever we take a downtime action that requires rolling, we can roll twice and take the higher result. This combines exceptionally well with the elf ancestry, so I can definitely see a lot of elf witches in the future. Our second feature is Tethered Talisman. This allows us to imbue a small token and give it to an ally. Then when that ally is hit with an attack, regardless of whether or not they marked hit points, we can expend the magic from that talisman to cause the attacker to mark 1 hit point. This is fine, it's pretty good. It is only once per rest, so it's certainly not useless, but it's not changing the game either. Our next subclass is Moon, which also sets our spellcasting trait to Instinct. The first feature we get is Night Watcher, which makes it so that when we are in moonlight, we gain a +1 bonus to our spellcast rolls. This feels a bit too niche to be very good. There aren't any ways to manipulate or create artificial moonlight that I'm aware of, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So this is going to be a feature that does provide a good bonus, but it's only going to work in very limited circumstances, and pretty much never if you're in a cave or a dungeon or something like that. The second feature we get is Impale Light, which makes it so that when a creature within far range that is under the effect of our hex fails an attack, we can force them to mark a stress. This is also very strong and serves to make Hex even more powerful than it already is. The Witch feels like a very thoughtful and flavorful class. I think the subclasses need a little bit of tweaking, but I think we're off to a very good start here. So those are the 4 brand new subclasses and the 1 new domain that is likely coming to Daggerheart relatively soon. Let me know your thoughts and what you would change about them if you would. Remember to support incredible creatures on Kickstarter, but otherwise, take care.